So let's see. Welcome everybody to today's webinar. I can see that we are 11 people in the call right now. So we're just going to give it 1 or 2 minutes and see if anybody else drops in, because we had a few more that signed up for today's webinar. So yeah, let's just take a minute or two. So I can see that it is now 2 minutes past the hour and a few more has joined in today. Super nice to have you all here today with me. My name is Sebastian Lennartsson and I am the commercial trainer for Microsoft. I'm unfortunately having some connectivity issues, so I can't, I'll just pause my video to ensure that we have the best possible sound and presentation in general. But anyways, today's presentation will be around Teams and SharePoint in Microsoft 365 and how we set things up. For some of you might have joined last week when we talked more about the unique selling points and why your customers should use Teams and SharePoint. But today will be more of a technical session on how they can use Teams and SharePoint. And with approach where we go through more of a how-to when onboarding them onto these platforms. So without further ado, I think I will just jump right in. If I manage to click the next slide, let's see here. So what we'll talk about today is the why, what, and how of how to get our customers started. Because as we can see, it is an ever-changing world we are living in, and we just want to ensure that we can make the most out of our workdays. And one of the main tools of achieving that is, of course, collaboration. So from a Microsoft perspective, we see a great value in Teams and SharePoint as a flexible tool for employees to be able to work from anywhere and collaborate during any circumstances. And of course, for those of you who joined me last week when we talked about Teams, this comes as no news, and many of you are probably using Teams out there. But what it is, in all essence, is a platform which of course has the main purpose of talking to one another, but we want to take it one step further. So our goal with Teams is to make a platform where you can do everything you might need that is in reference to collaboration. So for example, that you don't only have a platform where you have a call and then hang up and go and email around the topic of the call, but instead we want it as an ecosystem where we have everything on the same platform so that you can chat, call, have meetings with one-to-many or one-to-few, whatever you might need. But one of the perks that I will talk about is, of course, the integration of the Office 365 apps, because you need to be able to collaborate in a larger extent to be really efficient. And one of those tools that we provide then is the integration of the Office 365 apps, so that you can, whilst having a conversation with your teammates around a presentation, you can work on that presentation integrated into the Teams app. And you do that under files, where you can find everything and you can collaborate in a much more efficient way than has traditionally been possible. So we just want to help employees to reduce the amount of windows that they have to have open on their browser while being on a call. And all of this is of course done in a safe environment, because that's also an aspect of it, and I'm going to touch upon that later. But anyways, integrating Office apps, we're going to talk a little bit about that today, but most of all, we're also going to talk about integrating special apps, so unique apps that, for example, come from other parties, not only our own apps, because our tool is fantastic and we love it, but we don't want our customers to be bound by our offering. We want to collaborate and use the collective knowledge. And a way of doing that is by integrating apps that are not only Microsoft original apps. But we're going to look into that later on. And then, of course, it's about adapting so that you have the kind of tool that suits your organization. Because Teams is a very powerful tool and there's so much unused potential that you can get out of it if you just know how to use it. But today's session will be a little bit more of a lighter version where I'll also leave you with some links. So if you want to know more and how to really find those nitty-gritty and really heavy stuff on Teams, you'll be able to read up on that as well. But with that being said, it's also about privacy and security. And I'm going to come back to this later, but it's a very important aspect. It's not only about complying to GDPR and other data protection rules, it's also out of respect for your company's data and your customers' data. So of course, privacy and security is really important. And sometimes I think it might be easy to forget when you're in a meeting and you're just talking about valuable and sensitive information. You sometimes tend to forget that it is actually really important that you do that in an environment that is secure and compliant to all possible regulations. And that is where Teams and SharePoint, of course, in our ecosystem has a great value for our customers, so they can have an ease of mind and worry about productivity instead. So how do we do this? How do we get our teamwork started? Well, we know now that there are some really big gains, of course, with Teams and SharePoint. And we're going to start off by looking into how to create your first teams and channels. And I'm going to do it in a pretty brief way. I'm just going to show you the how-tos, and then in the end of this session, I'm also going to leave you with the links so that you, for example, can go check it out yourself or send it to a customer if they are inquiring about this. Then we're also going to look into if your customers are planning, or if you think your customers should be planning to upgrade from Skype to for Business to Microsoft Teams. And then of course, coming back to security and privacy in Teams. So first and foremost, how do we create a team? Well, it's pretty simple. On the left side of Teams, you just have on the bottom of the list, you can click the Teams button. Once you're in there, you click join or create a team, and then you click create new team. You give it a name, and then I'm going to show you also how to set the type of security levels on it. But anyways, just create the team, and then you find the members that you want to add to the team. And if you want to, you should also add a team owner. And that's done via the More Options button, where you press Manage Team and go to Members tab. Under Role on the member that you've chosen, you just click Owner, and then you have the team owner. With that done, you can, of course, choose to make channels underneath your teams to make sure that the type of information that you share with your employees is relevant and of course the right one, because you don't want your employees to have all your information, both out of security and compliance reasons, but also out of respect for the single employee. Because if you have everything as standard channels, you'll just make it very hard for an employee to navigate in your Teams channel. So make sure that you, when it is adequate, use the private channel, and when it's adequate, use the standard channel. Because, for example, you can create 200 standard channels, and that's great when it's more openly flowing information, not that sensitive and relevant to everyone within the team. But then you also have the opportunity to create 30 private channels so that you can create a channel, for example, for the HR department or for the economics department, so that you can make sure that the information on there stays on there and doesn't leave the company in any way. So by creating a standard channel, you just choose more options and add a channel, and then add more options, or you can also click more options, manage team, and add channels under channels. The alternative to create a private channel is very much similar. More options, add channel, add, of course, as always, the name and description, and under secrecy, you just choose private, and then you are done. The only thing that's important to remember is that the people you want to join your private channel, make sure that they're on the team first, because otherwise you can't add them to the private channel as well. So you can't skip the first step of the team before you add them to the private channel. And that's really important to remember. That means also that they can see all of the standard channels, and therefore making it so important to implement these private channels when they are needed. But anyways, when we've now seen what we can do and how we just set it up, I'm going to bring it back to the managing apps, because as I said, we don't only want you to use the traditional Microsoft 365 apps, but we want our customers to use the kind of apps that they want. For example, Adobe, which we are collaborating very closely with, they have an app called Sign. And if you haven't used that one, I can highly recommend it. All you do is that you go to the store and you search for Adobe Sign. It's an app that you download and that you then can add to your teams. This means that when you're discussing with a customer or whomever it might be, you also have the opportunity to implement a signing solution so that you can sign a contract without even leaving the app. And by doing so, you don't have to pay for another party provider for these kind of solutions. And most of all, you ensure that it's safe and it's compliant to all possible rules that are out there. So I highly recommend that you talk to your customers about how they can add the type of apps that would suit their business needs, no matter how big or small they are. But it's also important to remember that even though, of course, Microsoft takes responsibility and ensures that all apps in the store are secure, it's up to the admin to approve them for their teams. So this means that as an admin, you have to go to the admin center in your browser and then manage apps under Teams app. From there, you can make sure that the adequate and right apps are allowed in your system, and also make sure that you block the type of ads that you don't want your employees to implement in their Teams channel. So that's a little bit about managing the apps on Teams. And with that being said, I'm coming over back to the privacy and security, because it is just as important as ever. And we want to make sure that our data stays with our customers. So of course, it is only the people that are in the call and in the organization that control what kind of information that flows and who gets to take part of that information. And that's done by you deciding, or your customers deciding, who can join the call. And if anybody from the organization should be able to join, they'll have to grant access to that prior. But also to make sure that not everybody or the right people are allowed to present and also to record. And if a recording is taking place, it is of course, as you've seen before, and as in this call, it is notified. So we want to make sure that everybody knows that it's being recorded and that nobody who shouldn't be able to record is recording. And that is limited by doing, we do so by limiting it to the people who are on the call, or if it's pre-handmade settings where we limit it to a certain people within the call. And then, as of right now, and as you may have been aware of, if you're using our team solution, recordings are uploaded to Microsoft Streams, where you then have to download it, and afterwards you can upload it again to whatever tool, if you're using OneDrive or what it might be. But moving forward in 2021, we will present a solution actually, where we will move the downloaded recording to OneDrive for Business instead. And that will not affect the 1 terabyte of OneDrive that is included in the Microsoft 365 Business Standard package. But instead, it's a dedicated storage that makes sure that you have all of your recordings within the same ecosystem as you always use, that is OneDrive, just to make it a little bit easier. And if you're, for example, do recordings of webinars like this one and want to edit them, we just made it one step simpler we're not set on dates, but it will be in early 2021. The recordings will no longer be uploaded to Microsoft Streams, but OneDrive for Business instead. So that's a really nice new to take out to your customers when talking to them, so they're prepared for this shift. But it will not be any big changes in how it's done. It'll go just as smoothly as always, but it will land on another source than it used to. And then if you have a customer out there that want to upgrade from Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams, because Skype for Business, and for those who are in this call that are aware, of course, Skype once was a very dear Swedish company for many of us, but that was bought from Microsoft. And we've used a lot of their technology to make something even greater, because for us, Skype was a great meeting platform, but we wanted to create something else, and that is where Teams comes in. We want to create something that expanded the capabilities of Skype for Business, where we could bring together chat, meeting, calling, collaboration, and app integration, of course, so that everything was in the same ecosystem, and more importantly, into a single interface. Because in this way, we just make sure that teamwork can be even more streamlined and even more efficient. So we feel that it's time to actually say goodbye to Skype for Business. And this will take place on the 31st of July in 2021, which means that there will be no further access and support for Skype for Business. That, however, and I want to be clear with that, is with the exception of those solutions which are implemented with a server solution. So for those customers who have an internal solution with Skype for Business on their server solution, it will not be affected. But for customers who are using Skype for Business as a standalone unit for calling, they will actually have to upgrade. So it's a great possibility for you to call out to customers and talk to customers and ask them and inquire if they're still using Skype for Business, or if they perhaps should consider upgrading to Teams, because the value of Teams is immense, and it's therefore very important that we just are transparent with our customers, so they don't stand there in the mid of July and wonder what are they going to do now. So just inquire your customers about it and see what their thoughts are. Important to know, if you're doing the transition, it's possible to use Skype for Business alongside Teams. So that's also a great takeout. But I will drop you some links in the end where you make sure that if you want to read more about this, or if you want to send it to a customers, you have the possibility to do so. So with that being said, the steps, of course, now with Teams is just to get your customers started and make sure that you set it up for them so that they are up and running and can achieve even more with their teams and with their collaboration. And as you can see here, we're also talking about how to get support. And I'm going to drop you the links in the end, but it's a great resource as we have with Fast Track and Adoption Hub, so that you, if you want to know even more, you can read on there, and you can also, of course, as I said, share it with your customers. The next point is SharePoint, where we want to get customers started so that they can collaborate within their organization. And before they get started, it's just really important to have in mind what are we trying to define our organization with, because SharePoint is an amazingly strong tool, but as an IT pro, you'll also have the responsibility of making sure that you have the adequate framework to work around SharePoint. But I recommend all organizations to get SharePoint, and that is so easily done by just clicking the button. The SharePoint button, starting up the app, making sure that you can collaborate within your organization to a much better level than you ever have before. But as I said, it's really important where your organization stands and make sure that you define those frameworks before you get started, because SharePoint is all about sharing and all about making sure that you have a platform where you can help each other. But it's not only as in you're sharing everything at all times to everyone. Of course, just as in Teams, you can define privacy and define everything around that. And I'm going to go a little bit into that soon. So what you want to do is just press the SharePoint tile and then create side and shows the team side option. Once you've given it a name, you are actually just started on SharePoint. What you want to do now is make sure that you have the privacy settings that are adequate for your team. So that, for example, if you're in HR and you know that you're only going to process the new applicants on your SharePoint, well, then, of course, you want it as a private SharePoint. But if, for example, it's more of a SharePoint where you share your general ideas and exchange thoughts on work environment, it's much more convenient to have it as visible for everyone in your organization. So really just simple defining there of who can view this SharePoint, and you can just set it up to tweak it and match your needs. Once you've done that, you just add the users and then the documents. So it's really, really simple to get it started. And it's a great tool because by doing so, you make sure that you can share your ideas with your employees. But it's also important to remember that there are some features that you don't want to share with everyone. And even though you feel certain that you can share it with the special someone, we need to recognize the threat of employees actually working against their employer. And I hope to say that none of us here do that, but we can't foresee, we have to think about the fact that it could actually happen, that employees actually actively try to be irritating or to do, I'm sorry, I just got a little bit disturbed, to do wrong things against their employees. And that could include, for example, going into important documents and change numbers or change facts. But within settings of SharePoint, you can always start and by putting settings to notify me when somebody changes anything within your documents. So that's a way of making sure that your information stays within the companies. With that said, I think I've gone through what I needed to go through on SharePoint and Teams. And I just want to talk about the final thing, which is a recurring thing with all my webinars, and it's called the Office Attach widget. And I don't want to go nitty gritty on this one, but I'm going to leave you with some contact details if you want to know more. But Office Attach widget, however, it's a product logo where we want to help you to sell more. It's a totally cost-free implementation where we help you together with also to implement a product logo on your web page, so that when your customers goes online and want to buy a new computer, we just give them this little reminder to buy Office as well. And you might ask, is that really necessary? Well, statistics show that 80% of all customers does not know that Office is not included. That means that a majority of all customers who buys a computer without Office will end up being really disappointed. This can be helped, and we can ensure that we don't lose customers to any competitors by implementing this little widget. So it's a totally free implementation and make sure that the customer gets a better customer experience and customer journey. So without leaving the web page, they are reminded to add Office, and that is done via a single click add to cart. So really smooth tool that goes really quickly to implement. And if you want to know more, you can either read more on our webpage or contact Evelina on Microsoft, and you got our contact details right here. So I'm just going to hang on to that for a few seconds. But it's a really good tool, and I highly recommend it. So what we've seen statistically is that we have a 44% increase in sales for those partners who have implemented this tool. And then the final note of today, before I hand over to Dawn, is around a tool called Expert Zone. So Expert Zone is a tool where we want to help you to achieve even more, because many of you out there are of course thirsty for knowledge, and the most common thing to do then is to go to a search engine and Bing or Google to see what is going on around this and that. But we can do it in a much easier way by joining Expert Zone. On Expert Zone, I curate all the content to make sure that it's relevant for your market and your customer segment. So by scanning the QR code, you'll end up on the platform where you can learn more. For example, on what I've talked about today, you can learn more about Server, Windows 10, or whatever you might feel like. So it's a very nice tool. And if you feel like getting even more information about what I've talked to today, you can also go to these links. So successwithteams.com, where you get a guidance on how to with Teams, but also fasttrack.microsoft.com, where we have deployment guidance on almost every one of our platforms that we offer within the M365 suite. So great tools. And with that said, I would like to hand over to Dawn.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. By tomorrow, I will send you, who are joining this webinar, the information about the widget and also about Expert Zone and other important information that we have regarding Microsoft. So by the end of tomorrow, you will have it. And once again, I will thank you, Sebastian, for a great webinar. And yeah, see you soon again.
Yeah, thank you for taking your time and joining in today. I hope you found it good. And if you have any questions, I know you're in a listen mode only, but I do believe that you can write in the chat. So I'll just remain for a few seconds if anyone writes anything in the chat. Other than that, I would like to say thank you for joining in today.